Hello, dear friends at 1000 PS. I am Philip and I welcome you today from Magdeburg. Why am I in Magdeburg? Well, I'm with Schuberth, and as you can easily see, Schuberth is a helmet manufacturer, now even world champion with Max Verstappen in Formula One, but it started quite differently with this. And that's why I'd like to explain something to you now. This is the very first motorcycle helmet that Schuberth made, the Aero. And of course, a lot has happened in the meantime. It's from the 1950s, and we're now in the year 2022. And this is the new helmet, the Schuberth C5, a real premium helmet. And I'm here today to explain exactly why this is a premium helmet, what makes a premium helmet, and what technology is actually in such a modern flip-up helmet. And that's what we're going to look at now. I look forward to it. Well, everyone, the first person I would like to introduce to you from Schuberth today is Susan. She is the C5 project manager, which means she has known the helmet from the very beginning. You accompanied the whole project, and I would like to start with you and ask you the question, what makes the C5 special? What makes the C5 your premium helmet? Please tell me a bit about it.
Okay, so why is the C5 premium? Well, it's just as premium as our other products, of course. But this was really the challenge of the new standard that we wanted to fulfill, and that really was a challenge. But fundamentally, why are we premium? I can actually answer that quite simply. Everything we develop and all the development skills we put into it are always based on one premise. Security for our customers is now at the very, very top of the list. In addition to the new standard, the new requirements, the tougher requirements, which means offering even more safety for our customers, we also wanted to create a new communication system and further optimize our comfort by simply offering our customers an individualization concept so that perhaps everyone can wear a Schuberth helmet and individualize it for themselves.
We're talking about customization now?
Exactly. We're talking about the interior package, which means the interior fittings, so that you can basically exchange different pads for different heads and really try, or our attempt is, to say that we can let everyone wear a Schuberth helmet.
You also told me that you have a very extensive, really great test program with the helmet. Tell us briefly, when did the planning phase for this helmet begin? How long did it take until the helmet was ready, and what happened during this time?
Exactly. We invested 20,000 hours from the product idea to series production of the helmet. 20,000 hours across the individual departments, of course with a focus on our development department and the industrial engineering team, and the quality and testing laboratory, like myself. The hours are spread over a period of around 3 years. Of course, the premise was also premium. We want to be just as quiet, we want to be just as light as our previous helmets, even though the new standard demands new requirements from us. These were actually the challenges where we really invested the 20,000 hours and also took the time. I think that also speaks for premium, simply taking the time in these fast-moving times. In addition to the 20,000 hours, we really tested 2,000 helmets in terms of crash performance, not just for crash performance, but also in endurance testing to see how our parts really work, that they are durable, that they really are premium. And in terms of aeroacoustics and aerodynamics, we invested 400 hours, of course, with our in-house wind tunnel. With our first one, which we have here on the table, with our first prototype itself, we went into the wind tunnel and looked to see if it was aerodynamic, aeroacoustic, what makes a Schuberth helmet. And of course, we were able to develop it further over the 3 years. And in total, that's 400 hours, including the test riders and the test rides that we did, which we also invested here.
For the aerodynamics now and for the aeroacoustics?
For the aerodynamics, aeroacoustics, to really balance the helmet, to make it as quiet and as well ventilated as possible.
One of your questions on Instagram was, yes, I'll pass it on to you now. You launched the helmet very early in the new year with the new standard. People were wondering how that happened so quickly. Maybe the secret is that you do almost everything here in Magdeburg, right?
Exactly. Of course, we also have an Italian subsidiary, Schuberth Performance, which is our expert for motorcycle helmets for the interior, that is for the inner package of the helmets. But fundamentally, I think this is our strength and what sets us apart, that we can do everything, that we have everything from a single source that we actually produce here, that we develop here, that project management is based here. I think that simply promotes communication with each other. I always say Schuberth One Team. That really is the case. With this product and this project, we have once again grown beyond ourselves and naturally also grown together. And communication is a very important keyword with such enormous pressure.
When you say that everything comes from a single source and within 3 years the helmet has gone from this to that, so to speak, what is the advantage of doing everything at one location? Shorter distances, quicker decisions, and so on, right?
Exactly. I would say so. Another positive thing to emphasize is that we naturally have our own wind tunnel, our own test laboratory, and in addition to the development department, our engineers and prototype builders, our own prototype construction department where handmade prototypes are assembled, and we are able to test helmets at a very early stage, especially for the new standard, and that we knew relatively early on that we were on the right track, that we had designed the helmet correctly, and of course, we are still adding that little bit of Schubert in terms of safety.
You said something very interesting. Not only did you meet the new standard, but you actually exceeded it, so to speak, because...
That's the Schubert quintessence, I mean. We have set ourselves the task of always going one better, and not just taking the limits of the standard. And we've achieved that with this helmet.
Good, thank you. And now we'll take a look at how this helmet turned out. Let's take a look at the production process. We'll find out how this helmet is made, how the shell is formed, and so on. The most important thing about the C5 is, of course, the helmet shell, because that's what protects us in the first place. And now I'll show you why and how it all works out. Let's make a quick change. This is what the helmet shell looks like. This helmet shell has already been primed. This is very important before you can paint it afterwards. The special thing about this helmet shell is that it has been developed using a Schuberth process. This is called DFP, direct fiber processing. This means that the fiberglass is mixed together with a resin and then it is shaped and assembled in this form from the left and right. And then in total, so to speak, using a very special process. What I have seen, which I am unfortunately not allowed to explain to you in more detail because it is a trade secret of Schuberth, is then brought into this form. And the advantage of this technology is that Schuberth has managed to reinforce the shell very selectively where it is really needed. And where it is not really needed, the shell is a little lighter and perhaps less firm in quotation marks, but strong enough to guarantee safety. As a result, I save a bit of weight overall and have protection at the critical points that are important for crash safety. And where I don't need it so much, I have a slightly lighter helmet and have more comfort, so to speak, because the helmet is not so heavy. The structure of the C5 is as follows. We have the shell, the core, so to speak. Then the so-called EPS is inserted here. This is a type of polystyrene that also defines the shape of the inside and acts as a kind of buffer so that if you fall, the energy is absorbed. And then there's the padding, the inner lining, and that is also something special when you fall. And that's also something special about the C5 because you can change the padding on the inside very individually, both on the forehead, the cheek, and the back. This allows you to adapt the helmet perfectly to the shape and size of your head. This also means that you have to be a little careful when buying a helmet, because when you first put it on, let's say you need a 59, you can still adjust it individually. So don't be alarmed if you put the helmet on and it doesn't fit perfectly. Then it's best to talk to your trusted Schuberth dealer and say, okay, it's pinching or I've got a bit of air, what can we do? Because you can still adjust it properly with the lining. And why this helmet is so safe, let's take a look at that in the crash test. So everyone, now let's talk about the most important thing, helmet safety. The new Schuberth C5 complies with the ECE 22006 standard, and this standard is much more comprehensive than the old test standard. More test points have been added to the 06 standard, 12 more test points, and this also means that the helmet has to be tested much more extensively, much more often. And Schuberth has given us an example here. You can see how many helmets were needed in the past and now. You used to be able to test the entire test standard with 2 helmets. Today you need 14 more helmets to do it. And the test standard is of course extremely important for us motorcyclists because it tests different accident scenarios and ensures that the helmet remains safe under all these conditions. And in order to test the ECE standard, the new 06, this is done on a drop test bench. And it works like this. The helmet is clamped at the top and at the bottom, practically in the floor. We have these various test setups on which the helmet crashes. We have something here called a curb, which is a curbstone, so to speak. We have a flat, which is the flat floor, you could say. And this third part is new in the ECE 06 standard, the so-called oblique impact, which is tested here. It's about the helmet falling onto it, and the rotation is measured, the moment of centrifugal force on the head, if you like. And of course, the new standard also specifies exactly which points these test specimens hit, and that's what we're looking at now. This is now the new test standard, so to speak, with all the impact points. And compared to before, there used to be 5 points, and now there are 12 more test points. And these test points are drawn directly onto the helmet with a laser so that you have exactly the right point, so to speak. And we'll take a look at what this looks like in reality right now. On the drop test stand, we're going to crash the helmet a bit. Okay, I'll give you the helmet to test now. Very important, people, quick note, we're going to leave the drop test stand open for filming so that you can see it better. Normally, safety first, everything has to be closed, and we have to be on the safe side. And guys, that was only 27 kilometers per hour. 27 kilometers per hour, that wasn't any faster. Guys, we've now taken our helmets off again for a moment. You can see here how this curb has hit. You can see the deformation here. And the special thing about the Schuberth C5 is that it was not only approved as a closed helmet, but you can also ride it open. You still have to lock it here. And of course, the helmet has to pass a crash test. And we'll check that again now.
Und bitte. Whoa!
That was a real bang. You can see that the visor didn't survive, although it's actually still intact. It just popped off. But when I look at the helmet here, the chin part is still on. Just like the test standard specifies, it's obviously badly damaged, but it's still on. The helmet is safe. It passed the test. Wonderful. Safety first. We've seen that the shell can take it. Now it's all about the visor in the ECE 2206 standard. In the new standard, which the C5 also fulfills, there is also a so-called bullet test. This involves firing a small steel ball, 1 gram and 6 millimeter in diameter, directly at the visor in such a setup device. This bullet is accelerated to 60 meters per second, shoots at the sight, and the bullet must not pass through. And now let's see if the visor can withstand it. Okay, the bullet has been fired. Let's see if the sight has survived. We just have to reach in for a moment. Thank God everything is safely secured. So let's take the helmet out for a moment. And as you can see, here's the bullet hole. Nothing has gone through. The visor is completely stable and intact. And you can't feel anything on the inside either. So the visor of the Schuberth C5 is bulletproof. And now we move on to the subject of aerodynamics and aeroacoustics. Hello, Sebastian. This is Mr. Aerodynamics and Mr. Aeroacoustics at Schuberth.
Hello to you.
Would you be so kind as to switch on the wind tunnel for a moment? So let's knock the helmet off for a moment. Because at Schuberth, as we've heard before, a lot of research is being done here into aerodynamics and aeroacoustics. Normally, it's relatively quiet in this room, even as quiet as a mouse. We have sound-absorbing elements everywhere, because in addition to aerodynamics, the acoustics of a premium helmet also have to be good. And that's why we have the Sebastian, and you can already see it. This is what it looks like, relatively spectacular, when you measure the drag of the helmet and the lift of the helmet. And there's a fun fact that I found out that I didn't know either. The C5 has a ventilation flap, and when you open it, the air comes in from above. And I've always wondered why it's done this way, so that air comes in from above. The air comes in from the front. And Sebastian, could I ask you to hold this up again? Maybe you can show it briefly. If you look at the airflow on the helmet, you can see that the air comes from here and it goes partly up and partly down. And if the ventilation opening is such that it opens from the front, the air that reaches the front of the visor goes down like this. And of course, that's something I honestly didn't know. What we saw there was quite spectacular. Sebastian, you are Mr. Aerodynamics at Schuberth. We are now seeing a dummy here. The first question I have for you is, at what speeds do you test your helmets here in the wind tunnel?
When we do aerodynamic measurements, we normally measure them at 160 kilometers per hour. This makes good use of the measuring range of the force sensor, and we can say relatively accurately what the helmet will do on the road afterwards.
You measure the resistance from the front and the buoyancy?
Yes, of course. We also measure the side forces. Of course, these only occur when you look to the side, but this is also relevant for the driver.
And then you also told me that you don't use the dummy when you take acoustic measurements.
Yes, we actually did the acoustic measurements with the dummy at the beginning. However, it had a very special head. It had an egg-shaped head, a small chin, and a bull neck. And if the helmets fit people best, who look exactly like the dummy, then that's a very small percentile of the population. And we have now done away with that. We now always test on test subjects and put microphones on our ears so that we have accurate measurements.
In other words, someone sits here, is blown into the wind tunnel, as you say, and then has to give you feedback on how the acoustics behave as a driver.
Yes, of course we have measured values. Because we have microphones on our ears, we have exact measurements of how loud it is in the helmet. But the advantage of the person sitting there is, of course, that they tell you a whole picture book, whether it's whistling, whether it's blowing in your eyes, whether it's comfortable or something like that. You learn more when you work with people.
Okay, wonderful. Now, one more little thing, because you also told us that. You can see here on this visor that you have these triangles on the front. I asked you what that actually is, and you gave me a wonderful explanation. Could you tell our viewers that again?
They're called turbulators. These are small elements that ensure that the air there becomes turbulent. The problem with the C3 was that when you opened the visor, the helmet whistled a lot. And that was because the air then moved away from the visor in waves. And because you put small turbulence generators on the visor, the flow splits up and makes lots of very small partial noises that cancel each other out. Then you have a quiet noise, but no more whistling.
That means it's actually an acoustic measure?
That's an acoustic measure, yes.
And next we go into the climate cabin, because Schuberth has that too. And now we'll take a look at how the helmet is tested under different weather conditions. Hi guys! In the meantime, we've warmed up a bit. We're now in the climate chamber, and there's a lot of sunlight around us. Sebastian, tell us briefly what you do in the climate test chamber.
We can see how the ventilation of a helmet works here. Of course, we would also do this with test subjects. And we have a sunlight source here that goes up to 18 kilowatts. That's probably twice as much as you get burned on your forehead from above in Death Valley. And we can easily see whether the ventilation elements are in place. In other words, that the ventilation elements of helmets work. And what we do most often, of course, is rain. That's much more dramatic. We let the motorcyclist, we don't usually do this with test subjects, there are very few volunteers. We let them ride in the rain at around 80 kilometers per hour. And they should normally be able to ride for at least 10 minutes without a drop of water getting into their helmet.
Into the helmet means somewhere inside the helmet, so it mustn't get on the skin, so to speak, or not inside at all.
So it doesn't matter if it gets in through a small hole somewhere and flows out again at the edge. Nobody notices and it doesn't bother anyone. But of course you don't want it to come into view and you don't want to get it on your head.
And you explained to me that strip has a reason why it's hanging there. What exactly are you testing?
Of course. When there's a wet atmosphere out here, we only see lots and lots of drops. But we can't see whether a drop has gotten inside the visor. And with this paper handkerchief stuck behind it, you can see immediately, even from a great distance, and in the worst weather, that there is unfortunately a drop inside the helmet.
All right, then I would say we let it rain a little.
Scheißwetter!
The poor guy here has now been sprinkled with 2 liters a minute. And that's quite a lot of rain, relatively heavy rain. I've been told that motorcyclists don't normally ride in such conditions, but you can see here that the visor is still dry as dust on the inside. That means the helmet is tight, no moisture gets in, test successfully passed. We've talked about premium helmets, and above all that they are tested a lot. And what you can see here is a machine that does nothing but open the visor, open the chin section, open and close the air vents all the time. So now you've seen how the decor is applied to a Schuberth C5 with a lot of effort and manual work. This is the master blue decor. Why is this done by hand is the question. Can't a machine do it? No, it can't. The hand does it better and more accurately. And above all, people do it better and more accurately. Because as you have just seen, it is glued onto the hand. Why? Because there are so many fine edges that need to be aligned. It then has to be pressed flat so that there are no creases, no shifts. It can then be painted with high quality clear lacquer. And that's why it's manual work, because only then can you achieve this premium standard. So, dear people, and I promised you that we would also talk to the CEO of Schubert. He's sitting opposite me now. This is Christoph. And Christoph, I would like to start with the first question. Give us a bit of an overview. What does Schubert actually do? Which business areas are you active in?
With pleasure, of course. So Schubert, we always say that we are the experts in head protection. That's the headline. And we are active in a total of 6 business areas. Our biggest area is motorcycles. It accounts for a good 50% of our turnover. That is also the reason why we are sitting here together. But there's more to it than that. For one thing, it's motorsport helmets. Max Verstappen is world champion, which is, of course, a big story for us. But derived from that, you could also say motorsport helmets for mass sports. It's relatively small in terms of numbers, but it's growing very strongly at the moment, so it's also a lot of fun for us. And then there are areas that we always describe as professionals. These are applications in the industrial and professional sector. On the one hand, these are safety helmets. These are fire department helmets. These are police helmets and also military helmets. Yes, a difficult topic, especially in these times.
How many employees does Schubert have in total at the moment?
We have around 400 employees. The majority of them actually work here at the Magdeburg factory. All functions, development, and production are represented here. And then there's another factory in Italy, Schubert Performance, which is mainly responsible for racing, but also for carbon helmets, carbon shell production, all these things.
I asked Susan before, how would she define premium? Now I would ask you, as a premium helmet manufacturer, how would you define the word premium?
Premium always means being a bit better everywhere. And in the case of a helmet, that is logically the product itself. And that starts with the normal features, you might think. That is safety. Even then, we always try to go that little bit further. Everyone knows the standard. But for us, and you can see this in the comparative tests, we also try to be a little better in the individual values everywhere and add a little more. The other premium things in a helmet are, of course, comfort. Comfort is very, very important, not only because it's naturally more pleasant, especially when you're on the road for longer, but because it's also a passive safety feature. I'm not distracted. I don't get a headache. I can concentrate on driving. And that is a very, very important feature for us in many details. That's the interior, that's the fit, and that's, of course, noise, aerodynamics, all these topics where we put a lot of emphasis, and that's what makes it premium. And then the rest is functionality, which is all well known at Schubert, integrated communication systems, a bit more ventilation, and all these details, I would say. And that's where we try to differentiate ourselves to a certain extent. And then in the overall package, it's the difference that turns a helmet into a premium helmet, a Schubert helmet.
You now have the new C5, which is a very important helmet for you. I'd like you to briefly explain what the target was for the C5 and how did you achieve it?
The C5 is, of course, our flagship helmet. Schubert stands for flip-up helmets, no question about it. And so it was clear from the outset that it had to be the best flip-up helmet imaginable. And yes, in this respect, we looked at where we stood, what could be improved, and then we really went into every component. We really touched on everything from the functionalities to the individual components. Now, you can always ask yourself on the subject of innovation, why didn't you integrate a head-up display? We said, of course, we have all these topics on the agenda. Of course, we also look at what's going on. And we are also involved in development. But first of all, it's about simply putting a super top product on the table, where we say it can do everything a helmet has to do today. And of course, the new standard with the 2206. We wanted to be one of the first to launch a flip-up helmet on the market. And we succeeded.
We also talked to Suzanne about that. You succeeded. People have asked that too. We wanted to know first, how did you do it? We've already talked about it because you do a lot at one location. That means short distances, quick decisions, fast prototyping, and so on. In other words, accelerated processes, so to speak. That's why it's been successful in 3 years. I would still ask you now, we have these delivery problems all over the world at the moment with so many topics. How are you dealing with these problems? What is Schubert's strategy?
Well, first of all, in the development projects, of course, it doesn't make it any easier logically. But I think if you've spoken to Suzanne, she'll have explained to you that the processes we've defined to develop a helmet like this are, I think, all of the highest standards for how things are done these days, with milestones and always ensuring that you really do get a good result. Of course, it doesn't help at all if there are delays, and then some train is stuck in China because of some COVID issue, and our tool is on it, and we can sort of watch as it just stands there and say, why doesn't it leave? But it's just not possible right now. Well, you can sort it all out somehow, and it all costs a bit of sweat and tears. But fortunately, we made it to the finish. We were really proud of that. The team really did a great job. If you now look at what that means in this series, then of course you have the same issues every day for production. We now have a big advantage at Schuberth. We have a lot of added value in Germany, and we have a lot of added value in Europe. That means not only our production, but also many things from suppliers. We take great care to ensure that everything is of high quality, that it all makes a bit of sense somewhere, and that we don't ship things all over the world for the sake of a penny. And that helps us in this situation. Not that you could say that we're sitting here relaxed and everything is always there, but we have to improvise every week and organize things so that we're not missing anything. And even if it's a small screw, sometimes it's the craziest things. But fortunately, we managed to keep everything running smoothly. Where it hurts, we would like to produce even more, and that is simply not possible at the moment. In these times, you can't call the supplier and say, I just need 30% more. Then he says, yes, I need time. I can't do it. And that's a bit of a shame because we could sell more.
You're currently sold out.
I think so. Yes, you could say that. Yes, we would like to produce more. We also know from the comments on the internet that customers then complain, and rightly so, and say, where's my helmet? And of course, we're sorry about that. Sure, we want to do business, that's one thing. But of course, we want to satisfy customers first and foremost, and that's not our aim. In this respect, the whole team here in production is really working extra shifts and everything to see what works. Yes, difficult at the moment, unfortunately.
There are a lot of helmet manufacturers on the market at the moment. The range is also very wide. From cheap, very cheap, you can get motorcycle helmets at Aldi to premium helmets like yours and even higher. You are the CEO of a premium helmet manufacturer. If someone were to ask you now in a pub, for example, please explain to me very briefly and concisely, how can I, as a layman, recognize when I have two helmets in front of me and they both have, let's say, a visible carbon layer? How can I tell the difference? What is a premium helmet and what is not a premium helmet?
Yes, that's quite an exciting question. If you put two helmets next to each other like this, I always say there are two views. First, you look at the outside, and then you turn around and take a look inside. And the first impression is certainly surfaces, paint quality, plastic parts. Do I still have a degree somewhere, or is it all clean? I would say that you can really tell the difference, and we go to great lengths here in terms of paint quality and surfaces. And in the beginning, I always thought it was quite a lot of effort, until I actually heard from customers and dealers who told me, hey guys, your surface quality is something else. And especially with carbon helmets, for example. There's a lot of stuff on the market, I'd say. Nobody looks to see if there's any warping or anything like that. Our helmets are mercilessly rejected in quality control. Those are the one things. And from the inside, you can see it in the textiles, in the design of the helmet. Are these high-quality materials? We use fabrics from Italy. And I think you can tell. And that's a bit of a challenge. You don't necessarily notice it directly when I show it to someone in the pub or whatever. You notice it when you have your helmet on for a while. And that in turn is a feature where quality simply pays off. And I'm a bit like that myself. I mean, always buying, throwing away everywhere is somehow not the concept for this world in the long run, I think. And I feel much more comfortable with a product that we can say is quality and will last a few years. And if something does break due to wear and tear, then there's a spare part and you can fix it. So it's a long-lasting product that's fun to work with. But in case of doubt, the customer only realizes that once they've had it for a while. I would say that the proof is in the high number of customers who, once they have bought a premium helmet, a Schuberth helmet, come back and buy it again and again. And for me, that's a sign that it obviously makes a difference. But maybe, as you can see, not explained in one sentence in the pub, but you just have to deal with it a bit.
You also mentioned you guys make Formula One helmets like that. Do you learn anything from Formula One helmets for all our street helmets?
Yes, we do. That's what Formula One is all about. You always go to the absolute limit of what's possible. And with a helmet, it's always about crash weight performance. And of course, I can build a super safe helmet, but then it weighs a kilo more. If I were to explain our police helmets to you now, they are a bit heavier, but I can hit it with an axe quite often before it's damaged in any way. When it comes to Formula One, you're really pushing the absolute limits in terms of materials with high-performance carbon fibers and all the construction and manufacturing processes that we use. And we also translate that into our, shall I say, normal range, where we look at what we can use. And so the C5 now also has an additional carbon layer. And some people say, I have a carbon helmet. Others say I'd rather have a lightweight helmet. We always go for the best mix of materials. Of course, I can write carbon all over it, but the benefit is that the helmet has to remain affordable from the point of view of simply finding a good compromise between all these aspects. And that's where the expertise in high-end Formula One helps us to translate and see what we need. As I said, carbon, for example, but also topics such as aerodynamics and so on. So it's a good combination that we bring all these topics together.
Let's take a very quick look into the crystal ball. You will, of course, have a 5 and 10-year plan. You probably won't tell us that now, even though it would be fun. But still, maybe give us a little insight into where the motorcycle helmet is heading, because your career in helmet development over the last 70 years has also been very colorful. You've seen very different things. Where do you think the journey is going? Let's say 5 to 10 years in the medium term.
The helmet itself will have to follow the same basic logic for the time being. Safety, weight, comfort in terms of shock absorption. We'll see what materials and concepts can be brought into series production. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is safety. And when I get an email from time to time saying, "Thank you very much, your helmet saved my life," then I say, cool. That's what a helmet is all about. And of course, we also look at what features would be really cool. Now we have the integrated communication system. I've already mentioned the head-up display. Of course, you can imagine one or two other things in terms of electronics. Yes, and of course, we're also looking at that. I mean, we see helmets with lights and all these, I'll call them gimmicks, but they're always very controversial in the community, but they're part of it. They're part of an innovation. We always make sure that we say, where is the customer benefit? Because just to somehow make everything super fancy, and everyone who sits normally on the bike says, what am I supposed to do with it? On the contrary, it gets in the way, is heavier, or has other disadvantages, which then seriously counteract the safety aspect. We would probably say whether that's the best idea. Well, of course, there should be one or two things to come, even with Schuberth.
Last question, the ECE 2206 standard has not only meant new homologation for many helmet manufacturers, but above all, new designs, because we have more crash points that have to be stable, so to speak. Most helmets have become heavier. You also said that the weight of the helmet is also important. You can build a very safe helmet that is just very heavy. And you want to find a compromise here, so to speak, but we can probably assume that the standard will now exist for a while, then the next standard will probably come, which will probably be a bit stricter. Will there be further development also in terms of weight?
Yes. So at the end of the day, weight is always a cost issue as well. We have succeeded in making the C5 lighter than its predecessor. Of course, we had also set ourselves high targets, and that was only possible, for example, by including more carbon in the material mix. All at a cost that somehow still allows the normal positioning of this helmet. In this respect, we were initially proud that we managed to continue to build a very small helmet and a lightweight helmet despite the new standard. And the development goal, let's say, is probably on everyone's agenda. Of course, whether everyone manages to achieve it in this way depends not least on their experience and engineering know-how. The next step, of course, is to continue working on the material. Of course, you can build a full carbon shell, and that too in different versions, right up to a really very light helmet, like the one used in Formula One. Of course, it will cost a bit more, but there are always customers who say it's worth it to me. I find it comfortable. The low weight is, of course, a good feature, and I have the money for it. Then, of course, you have an even better product. Of course, we also look at how we can further reduce weight in this respect, what we can offer on the market, and then the customer has to decide.
Wonderful. Then Christoph, thank you very much for your time. I was very pleased. Thank you very much.
It was fun. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So everyone, my day at Schuberth is over. I hope you took away as much as I did. I hope you've gained an insight into what makes a good helmet, why a good helmet has a certain price. And now comes a personal appeal from me. I myself have had a serious motorcycle accident. I know enough people who have also had a serious motorcycle accident. Unfortunately, this happens in our hobby. But please, if you buy a helmet, make sure that it meets the latest safety standards. And please, even if it hurts, I know a helmet costs money, but if at all possible, don't skimp on the helmet. Buy a good helmet. Buy a safe helmet, even if it costs maybe 100-200 euros more than usual. But please don't save in the wrong place. On that note, thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon. Goodbye and see you soon.